for the right side of the end zone. It is caught. Calvin Johnson.
Calvin Johnson is regarded as one of the best wide receivers of his generation. He had an unreal combination of height and athleticism, which made him relatively unguardable. Despite his elite level of play, he only played in 2 career playoff games in his 9 years in the NFL. Spending his NFL career with the Detroit Lions was possibly one of the worst things that could have happened to Johnson, and as a result of playing there, his career lasted much shorter than it should have. Due to the lack of postseason success in his relatively short career, there was a real conversation on whether Johnson would make the Hall of Fame once everything was said and done. Today, we will break down Johnson's career leading up to the NFL, his run of dominance in the pros, his life after football, and finally, how good of a player he actually was. High school career. Calvin Johnson went to Sandy Creek High School in Tyrone, Georgia. Along with football, he also caught the eyes of some scouts in baseball as well. He was a standout center fielder for the team and was also an incredible batter. While he never got the eyes of many recruiters on him for baseball, this was mainly due to his commitment to being a football player. If he had dedicated all of his efforts to baseball, there is a chance he could have had a professional career in this sport as well. Although he potentially had a pro career waiting for him in baseball, Calvin was dead set on making it in football. In his sophomore year of high school, he caught 34 passes for 646 yards and 10 touchdowns. He followed that up in his junior year, with 40 catches, 736 yards, and 8 touchdowns. In his final year of high school, he had the best season of his high school career, going for 960 yards and 11 touchdowns. Recruiting. With Johnson standing at 6'4" and weighing in at 210 pounds coming into college, scouts all over the country were drooling over him. Depending on the recruiting site, he ranged from a 4-star to a 5-star prospect. Rivals.com gave him a 6 out of 10 rating and a 4-star ranking. They had him slotted in as the 37th best prospect in the 2004 class, the 3rd best in the state of Georgia, and the 6th best wide receiver in his class. He received offers from Notre Dame, Miami of Florida, Georgia, and Georgia Tech. It was important to him to stay in his home state of Georgia, and only took 2 visits in his process. The first occurred on December 12, 2003 at Georgia Tech. On his second visit, he checked out Georgia on January 9, 2004. Shortly after his visit to Georgia, Johnson committed to Georgia Tech on January 13, 2004. Johnson had a generational combination of size and skill. Because of the era that he was recruited in, he did not receive a fraction of the attention that he would have if he were being recruited today. Back then, college teams did not have the scouting departments that they do today, and with social media still being years away from being mainstream, it was a lot more difficult for players to get their names out there. Time at Georgia Tech. Calvin Johnson made an immediate impact at Georgia Tech. As a result of the Yellow Jackets not being the most prestigious school for football, he did not have a lot of NFL talent around him. Despite this, he still quickly made a name for himself as one of the best pass catchers in college football. In his freshman season, he caught 48 passes for 837 yards and 7 touchdowns. Along with this, the Georgia Tech coaching staff got creative with their use of Johnson and gave him a few rushing attempts as well. In his first year, he had 3 rushing attempts for 10 yards and a touchdown. At the end of his first campaign, he was ranked 3rd in his conference in receptions, 2nd in receiving yards, 2nd in receiving touchdowns, and 8th in total touchdowns in the ACC. He followed up his freshman season with another impressive run in his sophomore season. He finished the year with 54 catches for 888 yards and 6 touchdowns. He finished this season with high conference rankings. In his 3rd and final season at Georgia Tech, Johnson would have a career year in every major statistical category. He had a career high in receptions with 76, yards with 1,202, and touchdowns with 15. Johnson emerged as one of the top players in all of college football and finished in 10th place in the Heisman voting. He was named the ACC Offensive Player of the Year, the 2006 ACC Player of the Year, a 2006 Consensus All-American, and the recipient of the 2006 Fred Biletnikoff Award given to the top receiver in the country. He led his conference in receptions, receiving touchdowns, and receiving yards, and finished 3rd in the ACC in total touchdowns. It was clear after his junior year that Johnson was going to be a generational talent in the NFL, and his number would go on to be retired at Georgia Tech. Combine/draft. Through college, Johnson had grown an inch and made substantial efforts to bulk up to get a build that would be further pro-ready. At the Combine, he came in at 6'5" and weighed 239 pounds. NFL.com gave him a Combine score of 87 out of 100, which was the best for wide receivers in the 2007 class, an athleticism score of 92 out of 100, which was also the best in his class, and a total score of 99 out of 100, which put him far above any other receiving prospect in his class. Despite his massive height, Johnson blew scouts away at the 40-yard dash, clocking in at a mind-blowing 4.4 seconds. Many speculated that his draft stock would take a hit after he failed the drug test shortly before the big day. Along with this, scouts were concerned that his build would not allow him to compete at the speed of the professional game. The 2007 NFL Draft featured players that would go on to define a generation of the NFL. Some of the big names in this class included Joe Thomas, LeBron Landry, Adrian Peterson, Patrick Willis, Marshawn Lynch, Darrelle Revis, Lawrence Timmons, Michael Griffin, Reggie Nelson, Dwayne Bowe, Brendan Merriweather, Joe Beeson, Anthony Spencer, Joe Staley, Ben Grubbs, Greg Olison, Paul Posluszny, Eric Weddle, Zach Miller, Sidney Rice, Lamar Woodley, Steve Smith, Ryan Khalil, Jacoby Jones, and Marshall Yanda. Despite this being one of the top draft classes of all time, Johnson would be the second player off of the board, only Jamarcus Russell being selected in front of him. This would begin what would go on to be a Hall of Fame career with the Detroit Lions. NFL career. As a result of Johnson being drafted to a miserable Detroit Lions team, it took a bit for him to gain league-wide recognition. He did not have the elite quarterback play that other receivers around the league benefited from. However, he was still the most promising source of offense on the struggling Lions roster. In his rookie season, he gained the starting job after 5 games and caught 48 passes for 756 yards and 4 touchdowns. Despite this not being the most impressive start to a career, it was still enough to land him a spot on the 2007 All-Rookie team. He began to catch his stride in his second season, starting in all 16 games and having his first 1,000-yard receiving season. He finished the year bringing in 78 passes for 1,331 yards and 12 touchdowns. In 2009, the Lions would draft Matthew Stafford, who would end up being the most talented quarterback that Johnson ever shared a field with. However, with Stafford being a rookie, the team struggled, and Johnson missed a couple of games due to injuries. The following season would be the first time in his career that Calvin Johnson was named a Pro Bowler. Along with this, he was named to the All-Pro second team. He finished the season with 1,120 yards and 12 touchdowns on 77 receptions. 2011 was one of the most successful seasons for Johnson and the Lions during his time with the team. He caught 96 passes for 1,681 yards and 16 touchdowns. He was named to the Pro Bowl and the All-Pro first team. Along with this, the Lions made a trip to the playoffs.
Wild card Saturday, Lions in the playoffs for the first time since 1999.
One of only 2 appearances in Johnson's career. Despite Detroit losing the game, it was through no fault of Johnson's. He finished the game with 12 catches for 211 yards and 2 touchdowns. In the next 2 years until his next playoff appearance, Johnson would put together great seasons. He pulled in 206 passes for 3,456 yards and 17 touchdowns. He was named to the All-Pro first team and the Pro Bowl in both of these seasons as well. In 2012, he also set the NFL record that still stands today for receiving yards in a season with 1,964. Johnson and the Lions would make the second and final postseason run in 2014. In the regular season, he would have 71 receptions for 1,077 yards and 8 touchdowns. In the postseason, they were defeated by the Green Bay Packers by a final score of 20-30. Green Bay did an incredible job of limiting Johnson's involvement, and he was only targeted 8 times. He caught 5 passes for 85 yards. Although no one at the time saw it coming, 2015 would be the final year of Calvin Johnson's career. He played all 16 games and once again had a rather impressive season. He pulled in 88 passes for 1,214 yards and 9 touchdowns. Calvin desired to continue playing, but not in Detroit. He wanted to play for another team. However, he released a statement saying, "My agreement with Detroit bound me, and they informed me that they would not sever it, forcing me to return to them." This would not be the first time that their front office cut a Hall of Famer's career short. A similar situation caused Barry Sanders to retire from the game. Where does Calvin Johnson stand all time? The strongest argument that any haters of Calvin Johnson have is that he did not play long enough to accumulate the required stats to be in the best receiver of all time conversation. At the time of his retirement, he ranked 50th all-time in receptions, 32nd in receiving yards, and 25th in receiving touchdowns. While these numbers do not scream Hall of Famer, it's essential to take a deeper look into the numbers. In terms of per-game ranks, he is 3rd in receiving yards per game and top 10 in touchdowns per game. This was done while playing a good stretch of his career without a solid quarterback and a weaker receiving core that allowed teams to frequently double-team him. While it's tough to argue Johnson as one of the best at his position all-time with total stats, he passes the eye test and has top per-game stats, along with dominant tape of beating teams single-handedly. He was more than deserving of his placement in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2021, a generational talent and one of the best that the game has ever seen. Hey, you made it all the way to the end. That's very kind of you. We invite you to stick around because we are on our way to 1 million subs. This is just the beginning. Trust me, you're going to enjoy the ride. If you subscribe, comment with your subscriber number for us to remember. Here's to future memories. As always, thank you for watching The Halftime Show.